Hi, welcome to Pop Goes the Culture. Thanks for calling in. While you're waiting to be brought on the air, set up your computer or your phone or tablet properly to get the best possible picture and sound. We want you to look your best. You're going to be on TV. First, find a quiet spot with not a lot of noise, preferably away from the kids, pets, and traffic. If you have a headset, that will give you the best sound. If you're on your computer camera, don't lean in. Sit back and relax so that you're framed the same way you see people on TV, head and shoulders. You might even want to raise your computer up so that it's level with your face. Put it on a box or a book and make sure it's stable. If you're using a cell phone, see if you can get a simple cell phone tripod. They're easy to set up. If you don't have a tripod, no worries. Set the camera for selfies. Hold the phone about arm's distance from your face. Make sure it's landscape or horizontal, not portrait or vertical. Try to keep the camera level, not too high, not too low. Make sure you can see your whole face and maybe shoulders in the frame. Next, find a nice light in front of you. Never sit in front of a bright window or light source. Turn around until you find the best light and background and the shot is looking attractive. This is a good shot. This one, not so much. Don't put your head too high or too low in the shot. Your eyes should be about 1/3 down from the top of the frame. Okay, now you're looking and sounding your best, and you're ready for your close-up. Keep watching, and maybe we'll be bringing you on the show soon.
Tonight on Pop Goes the Culture, you're the talk show host. You have a chance to talk to our guest face-to-face, live. This is Ask Them Yourself. You've heard his voice on TV, on radio, in movies, commercials, cartoons, and even video games. He was the host of Bowling for Dollars, a regular on Imus in the Morning, and the narrator of VH1's Best Week Ever. He's done impressions, voiceovers, and been the voice of some of the most iconic characters ever, including Sunny, the Cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs bird. Yahoo! Count Chocula, and most notably in the 1980s animated series Thundercats as the heroic Lion-O.
Thundercats! Ho!
Tonight, your guest is Larry Kenney.
Pretty good, ain't it?
Now is your chance to talk face-to-face with a guy who rarely shows his face. Get ready, because for the next hour, Larry is here to take your questions. It's time to ask them yourself.
Okay, and welcome to Ask Them Yourself. I'm David Levin, and we are here, and we are live, and we are streaming here on the internet, and I urge you to call in now because this is your show. We want you to call in, and I'm very excited to talk to our guest tonight. His name is Larry Kenney, as we said in the show open, and I'm going to welcome him right now. Larry Kenney, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you very much. How are you?
It is good to see you. Today, we are going to have people call in. They're going to ask you some questions. That's the idea behind the show, but we're going to get the conversation started right away. Just the two of us, and we'll bring some people in already. We have a caller. So, Larry, you've been doing this for a long time, almost 5 years now.
Yeah.
How did you get...
Actually, 55 years.
Get out. You were 2?
No, I was 15 when I started.
Did you really? Where did you get started? You started in the Midwest, right?
Yeah, I started in Peoria, Illinois. I'm from a little town right across the river from there called Pekin, Illinois, great town. And I got lucky enough to get a job as a disc jockey on a Peoria radio station, WIRL, when I was 15 years old. I was playing the Beatles, and James Brown and stuff like that. And then I did that for a couple of years, and then they gave me my own show. Well, I started out actually on a little show called School Scope. It was 2 high school kids, me and another guy, talking about what was going on at the neighboring, all the high schools in the area, And we played records instead of playing commercials. Then they gave me my own show on the weekends, and then summer vacation, worked my way up through the ranks, and then moved from there to WOWO in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and WKYC in Cleveland, WJJD in Chicago, and finally to New York, where I've been for 45 years.
Wow. Wow. You have this iconic voice. You have this voice that we've heard on millions of commercials, and like every time you sort of turn around, you hear that sort of voice, and you became well known in the New York area, I think, through your work on WHN and also with Imus in the Morning, who just recently retired, and you did a lot of stuff with him. How did that happen? How did you end up sort of doing the impressions
with Imus?
Yes.
Well, as it turns out, Don and I had worked together in Cleveland. Well, not together. We've both been in Cleveland at the same time at different radio stations. And I did the afternoon show on a radio station, WKYC in Cleveland, and he was at WGAR, I think, and he did the morning show.
That was during his exile, I guess.
Actually, that was before his exile.
Oh, okay.
This was back in 1970. And so what happened was he was in Cleveland for about 2 years and then came to New York. I went to New York. About a year after that, I went to New York from Cleveland. And to make a long story short, one of his guys from his show in Cleveland, my engineer, it's been a long time.
Getting the chronology right is always difficult.
Well, it's getting harder and harder.
Yeah, I hear you.
But my engineer, the guy who ran the control board, played the records and stuff, Walt Ryan, he left Cleveland to go back to New York. He was from New York, and he went to WNBC in New York, where they made him Imus's engineer. So apparently one day, I got a call one day from Walt, and he said, "Hey, I'm with Imus now," and he asked me yesterday, did you work with Larry Kenney over at WKYC? And Walt said, yeah, I was his board operator. And Imus said, do you suppose he'd want to do some stuff on the show, on my show here on the telephone? And Walt said, I'll call him with you. And he did. And I said, yeah, sure. So for exactly a year, I would be on Imus's show every morning on the telephone from Chicago. And because I'm sorry, I'm messing everything up. I had moved from Cleveland to Chicago when he moved from Cleveland to New York.
Got it. Okay.
So
I'm taking notes, Larry.
No, man, it's up there. I know it's up there, but the retrieval is the hard part.
Yeah, I understand.
Now I'm with him every day on the air on the telephone for a year, and then finally I got a call from WHN radio in New York, and they offered me a job there, and I said, yeah, sure. So I came out to New York, and that was the first time I had actually met Imus, even though I'd been on the air with him for a year.
Wow.
And I was at WHN for a few years, and during that time, Don and I would hang out together. We didn't really work together, except he was doing records for RCA Victor, and his brother Fred was writing some songs. And I worked with him on that. I did a couple of demos singing, on those records. And one of them was called "Everybody Needs Milk, So Give Me a Bottle of Wine." That was our big hit. So that's how it started. That was when I came to New York in 1974, and started working with him again regularly. And so it was 35. I stayed with him 35 years.
Wow.
Until 2008, yeah.
Wow. Well, we have a call. We have a caller coming in. We got Steve from Queens.
Hey, Steve.
Hello,
Oh,
Larry.
my God. Steve Dworkin.
How are you?
Hey, I'm good, Steve. How are you?
David?
This is an old buddy of mine from
David, just
for
to
a
let you
long
know, I
time.
can hear Larry.
You can't hear Larry.
No, I cannot.
Oh, you can't?
Well, we can hear you. Hold on.
We can hear you.
Okay. Well, that's unfortunate that you can't hear him. That's hilarious. Hold on one second, Steve.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Steve, if you ask your question, Larry can hear you, and then
Okay.
and while he's giving you your answer, we'll get you on.
Well, I just want to say that great to see you, Larry. I haven't seen
You
you in
too.
a while. And I know all about your, being, on the radio and a little bowling show that you were on. But how did you get started doing the cartoon voices?
Okay. Well, first of all, it's great to see you, Steve. Steve, by the way, Steve Dworkin is one of the great engineers in New York, recording engineers, and he's worked at several of the studios that I've recorded at, and we've done a lot of commercials together, probably hundreds. But I haven't seen him for several years.
Wow.
So, can you hear me yet? Do you know?
I'm checking to see if he can hear you.
Okay. But what was
Not
his
yet.
question?
His question was,
Well,
how did you get started with the
right.
cartoons?
Yes, that's right. Well, I had always been when I was little. I always did voices. My mom told me that by the time I could talk, I was doing character voices. Bugs Bunny and things like that. So for some reason, I always loved doing impressions of famous people and cartoon characters and things like that. So I did that, and then I told you about my radio career, and I used to always incorporate voices and impressions on my radio show too, my disc jockey show. And then once I got to New York, I started doing commercials here. And then one day I got a call from my agent saying that they wanted me to go to an audition for a new animated show, television show. It was going to be recorded in New York. It was called Thundercats. And so I went and went to the audition, and fortunately got the role.
Had you ever done cartoons prior to that, Larry?
Not cartoon series, but I had already been doing Count Chocula, Sonny the Cocoa Puffs bird. Up here I won't go cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs.
Steve can hear you now. Yes.
Oh, good. Hi, Steve.
How are you, Larry?
I'm great, but I was saying wonderful things about you when you couldn't hear me.
Oh, okay.
And they're all true.
I'll have to ask Dave.
Yeah, I started doing Sonny the Cocoa Puffs bird in 1978. Now, as a sad note tonight, the gentleman who preceded me as Sonny the Cocoa Puffs bird for many years on TV was Chuck McCann.
Yeah.
And I'm sad to say Chuck passed away yesterday. I just heard an hour ago.
I had read about that. Chuck McCann was one of the great in New York for the longest time. I grew up watching him. He was one of the great kids show hosts.
Yeah.
And then he ended up doing commercials and movies and TV shows and cartoon voices. He's just a brilliant comedian and actor.
Yeah, he was brilliant. I never saw his kids show in New York, but I was reading about it, and it turns out he did 7 days a week, 2 hours a day. On that kids television show. Can you imagine that? Steve, did you watch that when you were young?
I saw it, not every day, but I saw parts of it. Yeah.
Yeah, Chuck was a lovely guy, and I got to work with him once on a Count Chocula commercial, maybe 10 years ago. He was on the phone from L.A., but because when he was doing Count Chocula, they incorporated into some of the spots this character called Grandpa. And Chuck McCann would do that voice too, on the commercials. Well, it's like only 10 years or so ago, I guess, and I wanted to do a commercial for Count Chocula, and they said, we got a surprise for you. Chuck McCann is going to be on the spot too, playing Grandpa. They wrote Grandpa back into the commercial. So that was really an honor for me to work with him, But that's how I got started. That was my first foray into animated things, Count Chocula. And then a couple of years later, I got the job as Count Chocula. First was Cocoa Puffs, 78. And then in 79, I got the job as Count Chocula. And it wasn't until 84, I think, we started recording Thundercats.
That was amazing. I mean, Thundercats is a phenomenon, and the kids who grew up listening to Thundercats to this day are huge fans. I know you've been to Comic Cons and you do signings. And how did Thundercats change your life? And did you have any expectation that something like that was going to happen?
Well, no, you can't. Nobody ever knows that something's going to be a big hit. You know, I mean, whether you're doing a TV show or a movie or a Broadway show, anything in the arts. You know, we knew from the very beginning. When I say we, I mean the cast, the rest of the cast, and Thundercats, and all the people involved. After recording a few episodes, we knew it was a good show. I mean, we knew the writing was great, and then once we saw the animation, that was fantastic. The music was great, so we knew it was a really great show. But that doesn't always guarantee success, you know, in the business. So it wasn't until the show had been on the air, which started in '85, had been on the air 2 or 3 months, and we first got ratings in, you know, and they were very, very good, and they kept going up and up. But I love to tell the story about how I first knew that the show was a big hit. It had been on the air for maybe 9 or 10 months, I think, and it was a couple of weeks before Christmas, and I was shopping at Toys R Us. Well, when I walked into the Toys R Us, I hadn't been there for a long time, but the last time I had been to Toys R Us, there were like 3 big aisles of He-Man and Masters of the Universe, you know, those cartoon shows, all their toys and all their action figures and things. And one little section on the end of a row was for Thundercats, because it was brand new. Well, this time when I went into Toys R Us, there were 3 aisles. I mean, from one end of the store to the other, both sides, all with Thundercats merchandise. I said to myself, wow, we got a hit show.
Yeah.
You know, that was really the first time I knew we really had something. But even then, I don't think anybody connected with the show could have predicted that 35 years later, we'd still be here talking about that show, you know. It's just been a phenomenon.
There's a quote from you online that says, my kids, I didn't become a star to my kids until I did that show.
Yeah. Well, yeah, of course they were kids and it was a cartoon show. Yeah, sure. I mean, before that, my kids knew what I did for a living. My oldest daughter, Carrie was, let's see, she would have been, 14 or so, 15 when Thundercats came out. So, you know, she was past that, you know.
Right.
But my smaller kids were born in '84 and '88, so, you know, they were there when it was happening, and they got to see, see all what was going on with it. And people always ask me, your kids must really think it's great that you're doing these voices and all that. But I remember when my kids were small, and I used to like to read to them, you know, as dads do. And I would be reading a book, having them on my lap, you know, and be reading a book. And I would say, and the old witch looked down and said, "Yeah, I'm going to get you." And my kids would look up and they would say, "Dad, just read the story. Just read the book. Don't do those little voices." It disturbs us. And I thought, well, okay, fine.
I get that from my kid too. It's disturbing.
Yeah.
Steve, do you want to hang out? Do you have anything you want to ask?
No, it was just great to see Larry and hear his stories. I've got Larry's stories, but I won't go into.
Yeah, I was going to say you probably got some stories about me, right?
Well, it's good to see you, Steve. And we will talk to you later. And if anybody else, by the way, people, if anybody wants to call in right now, like Steve did, just head over to askthemyourself.com. We are, of course, talking to the great Larry Kenney, who was the voice of Lino and the voice of Jackalman and a bunch of others, right? You were in Silverhawks.
Yeah. Well, first of all, we did several shows for Rankin Bass. That was a production company that produced Thundercats. Then we did Silverhawks, and then we did a show called Tiger Sharks. Then we did a Saturday morning 2-hour show called Comic Strip, which contained tiger sharks. Well, I don't remember, but it was 2 hours on ABC on Saturday mornings.
Right.
And they were all Rankin Bass productions. And then after all those were recorded, most of us in the same cast did several animated holiday specials. And a couple of those still run every holiday season. A Star for Jeremy was one. The Life and Adventures of Santa Claus was a claymation thing. So for several years, we were all working together for Rankin Bass, and became quite a family.
You and I used to work together periodically. We did spots for USA Network, and
yes, we did.
You did some great impressions. I mean, you're known for the Imus thing. I want to put up a couple of quick clips from the old Imus days, if you don't mind.
No, not at all.
Okay, hold on. We'll take a look. We'll take a look and see what we got. Hold on one second.
Put my
May I
glasses.
please welcome to the Imus Playing program, long dead 4-star General George S. Patton Jr. Good morning, General Patton.
Morning. Thank you very much. At ease. A lot of you people are wondering what our Commander-in-Chief is going to say tonight regarding strategy in Iraq. Well, I'm here to tell you people what I believe he should say.
Yeah. I mean, you were awesome. I used to listen. You did. Let's see. You did Nixon. You did Andy Rooney.
Yeah, I did Andy Rooney. Yeah, Ted Kennedy.
Yeah, I think I got. I think I got Ted Kennedy for you. Hold on.
Jerry Ford, I believe, once said, "Our long national nightmare is over." Hell, it hadn't even begun. And Bush somehow comprehends progress. How? 35,000 civilian dead last year. I mean, that's putting up Wilt Chamberlain numbers. Not that Wilt ever killed any of his dates. Not at all. No, that particular statistic, as you know, would more accurately fall into, well, my resume, regrettably. Let's conclude here.
He's got. There's a movie about Chappaquiddick coming on, so that's very appropriate right away.
Yes, very timely, huh?
And you did Cosby. You did all the ex-cons and
Future cons.
future cons.
Now I'm doing Comic-Cons.
Comic-Cons. So
That seems to be a thread they're running through those, doesn't it?
yes, well, it seems to be the story of my life is those sorts of threads. What's your favorite stuff? What do you love to do that you still do that you get to do?
Well, I love everything I've done. I mean, I love what I do for a living. So, first of all, there's no heavy lifting, and you can dress any way you want. Did I lose you, Dan? Are you still here? There we go.
Yeah.
There's the guy.
Thundercats.
Okay. Yes, I still have in your video signal. So give me
Okay.
1 second.
All right.
Hold on 1 second, and there you are. Welcome back. Well, now you're lower.
Thank
Hold
you. Thank you. I see green behind you, by the way.
on. I know. We'll fix that right up.
Okay.
Okay. Hold on.
This guy's magic, by the way, folks. Watch this.
You can't believe it.
Look at that. Look at.
You can't believe it. Okay. All right.
Okay.
Welcome back. Yeah.
Thank you. What were we talking about?
We were talking, well, before we got to the Thundercats hoe, and I always wondered about the Thundercats hoe.
I always refer to Chitara as the original Thundercats hoe. Which
Yes.
Lynn Lipton doesn't think that's funny, but Lynn Lipton played Chitara on the show.
So, so speaking of Chitara and Lynn Lipton, okay, I got one other thing to show you, and let's take a look at that.
Okay?
Oops, that's not it.
That's
Hey,
Cat's
Rhino,
lair.
what's going on?
I'm not sure, Chitara, but I've got a bad feeling Mumra's up to something.
I'll be right back. I'm gonna use the John.
Eye of Thundera, give me sight beyond sight.
Lionel, what are you doing? Snarf, snarf.
Oh, hey, Not much, not much. You want to get wasted or something?
Okay, now how did that happen?
Well, I got a call from my agent one day who said that they had gotten a call from Seth MacFarlane, the genius behind Family Guy, of course.
Yep.
He is a genius. He is a genius.
Yes.
And a great guy. That Seth wanted to use me on Family Guy as Lion-O. And I knew that from watching the show, I knew that they had done some skits before with Lion-O. And somebody else did the Lion-O voice. I think it was probably Seth.
It was Seth. He's got a great voice, yeah.
Oh, he's incredible. He's an incredible mimic. But I said to my agent, I don't know. I've watched that show. Now, you got to remember, this is 20 years ago, something like that. Maybe not quite that long.
Yeah.
So Family Guy was established. It was a huge show. And I had watched it. I thought it was a genius show. But I said, I don't know if I want to do Lion-O on there because, well, I've always been very protective of the legacy of Thundercats.
Yep.
Because, well, I don't want to go into why so much, but it was a very special show to a lot of people who,
yeah,
didn't have a lot of special things in their lives. And so I've never wanted to do anything that would, make fun of the Thundercats or demean them or anything like that. So I almost didn't do it. And my son Tanner, who was probably, 12 or 13 at the time, said, "Dad, you should do it. It's a huge show. All the big stars are on it, fighting to be on there." Now, how he knew that, I have no idea, but it was true. And so I said, "Okay, I'll tell you what. Send me a script, and I'll look at it and see if I wanted to." I got the script, and I said, "Hell no."
Really?
Yeah. Well, it's what you just played a couple minutes ago. No, that's not so horrible, right? That's not.
No.
But I was still. It was my son again, Tanner, who talked me into doing it. I kept saying, I don't want. That's kind of R-rated, and I don't. Tanner said, "Dad, you got to realize that the fans aren't 9 years old anymore. They're in their 20s and 30s.
Good point.
This is not going to offend them. They're going to love it." I said, "Okay, I'll do it." But and sure enough, everybody liked it. But I'm so protective of that. I don't want to do anything that's gonna bring disdain to the Thundercats fans.
The fans are, I spoke to a few people this morning. I went on a couple of radio stations to let them know that you were going to be on. The level of excitement that I heard from the on-air hosts, who are all in that sort of age range, was just beyond. Oh my God, Lion-O! It's just awesome. I mean, when you grow up with something, you probably grew up with stuff in about 5 or 10 years before me, and so the stuff I grew up with, you have that. Well, the way I felt about Chuck McCann, as a kid, and they feel that way about you,
Mm-hmm. It is wonderful. I always tell people fans ask me sometimes, what somebody's asked me before, what do you think about those of us who come here and stand on the line to get your autograph, which was quite a question. And I said, I'll tell you something. When I was your age, if I heard that Mel Blanc was going to be in this building on Sunday, I would be here the Monday before online, So, because I was a huge, I grew up watching. We all did. We all grew up watching cartoons and things like that, and I was a big fan too. So I know what it means to people, to meet somebody who is, especially when it's a part of your childhood, a nostalgia thing.
Yeah.
Because we all have. I mean, nostalgia is. I like to say nostalgia is not what it used to be, but it's still good.
I've said that once or twice myself. It'd be a good show title.
It would be, wouldn't it? So I really can appreciate, what it means to people to. My wife first started going with me to Comic-Cons, and she couldn't believe it. How she'd say these people this one guy was crying because he met you, and this other person was just speechless because he didn't know what to say. And she said, why is that? I said, well, and then I told her what I just said, that I would have been the same way when I was young.
Listen, you have always been great about that sort of thing. May I relate the story that I said that I reminded you of the other day about
How's it start?
My cousin? All right.
No, go ahead.
Years ago, when Larry and I worked together and we were doing promos for USA, and I knew that Larry was the voice of Lion-O on Thundercats. And my cousin's kid was about 2 years old at the time, or 3 years old. And Thundercats was absolutely his favorite show on Earth. And, when you're 2 years old, those characters are not cartoon characters. They're real people. They exist in the universe, which is why I think people get so emotional when they meet you. And so I asked Larry if he would do a voiceover as Lion-O and tape just a message to my cousin's kid. So Larry proceeds to do the thunder, 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 ho thing, and then asks my cousin's kid in his name. He says, this is a special message to, and then says his name, says his sister's name, says where he's from, and then proceeds to wish him and his whole family a happy Hanukkah. So I took that audio and I edited it with some video of Lion-O with some music and Lion-O's voice. Of obviously the lip sync on those old cartoons were terrible, so it was very easy to match Larry's voice up with this horribly lip synced cartoon.
Yeah.
And I popped the VHS tape. We used VHS tape back then, and I had to walk in the snow to get to the VHS machine and turn on the square television set and make sure we were on channel 3 and it was all plugged in. No wireless. We had wires back then and we liked it. And this kid is all grown up now and has kids of his own, so there you go. Yeah. But push the play button and the kid's sitting there. Oh, okay. The kid's mouth dropped to the floor. Okay, this is Larry Kenney, folks. This is what my friend Larry did for my cousin's kid. He never forgot it. First of all, he turns to his mother and says, "Mommy, Lion-O's talking to me." Then he goes, he wished me a happy Hanukkah. Are the Thundercats Jewish?
Well, maybe.
K-A-T-Z, Thundercats,
Yeah. Oh, that's great. I love to hear stories like that. I remember after the show had been on the air a few years, I went back to Illinois to visit my family, as I do every year. And my brother, Steve, said, do you mind if I have some of the neighborhood kids come over, to meet you? And I said, of course. Yeah, it'd be great. So I'm sitting there in the living room, and a little while later, here he comes with 5 or 6 of these, 10, 12-year-old boys. And Steve says, you wait out here in the other room, wait in the kitchen, and I'll introduce you. I said, introduce me? Okay. I hear him in there saying, guys, I have a surprise for you. Lion-O is here. And I hear this cheer going up, and I'm out there going, oh, no, don't do that, because they're going to be obviously disappointed. So I walk in, and they're all like, who's this guy in Bermuda shorts and Yankees hat on? That's not Lion-O. I said, Steve, you can't tell a bunch of kids that he's going to be here tell him it's the guy who does the voice of,
Yeah.
But I thought it was funny.
Well, that's the thing. You could do Lion-O over the phone for somebody, and then convince them that way, or from the other room, and then like, oh, he had to go, but he wanted to yell hello to you guys.
Yeah, that's right.
That's
got to be a microphone involved.
That's pretty awesome. Now, Imus in the Morning just retired last year. He's not dead.
No, just
so we
last
don't
week.
Have to. Just last week. That's what I meant. Just last week. Yeah. And he had been on the air for about 50 years. You were part of that show for quite some time. Any anything you remember? Any anecdotes that you can recall from your Imus years that you can actually share?
Well, as you can imagine, there were some pretty wild times.
Yeah.
You know, Don had problems with drinking and drugs back in the 80s. Well, the 70s.
70s, yeah.
Yeah. And to his credit, of course, he overcame that.
Yeah.
But during that period, there would be some, you know, you had to kind of keep an eye out for him. A lot of times after the show, we would go down to Hurley's Bar, which was right next door to NBC in New York, 30 Rock Villa Plaza. And he got kicked out of there about 3 or 4 times, I think, for just being obnoxious, you know, and drunk and coked up, stuff like that. That's not a funny thing, of course, but it's, you know, it seemed funny back then. I mean, we would be walking down the street, 4 or 5 of us, and he would just, like, pass a bank, and he would just open the door of the bank and run in and yell, "Nobody move!" And then we just walk away. I'm surprised he didn't get shot.
Wow.
One time, one of my favorite memories of our shenanigans, he and I were in Las Vegas with, I think, Geraldo Rivera, Wolfman Jack.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it was quite a unique group. I know it was those 2 guys. And Don had to be back in New York. This was we were there, you know, Sunday. And he had to be back in New York on the air the next morning. So we were out in front of a casino waiting for a limo, his limo. And it never came, and we were going to miss our flight. And it was like the last flight to New York that night. I can't remember. But Wolfman said,
"Hey, baby, you remember that guy I was talking to in there by the crab table? He's a Cadillac dealer, baby. He's got a Cadillac dealership right here in town. I got his number right